Namaste and a very warm welcome to all our viewers tuning into another compelling episode of Global Focus, the podcast where we decode international affairs with sharp insights and grounded perspectives. What happens when world's most powerful military alliance start to crack? And what if the man with the hammer is none other than Donald Trump himself? I am Hari Prakash Sinha, and in today's episode, we are diving into a topic that could reshape global geopolitics. Trump 2.0 and the future of NATO, viewed through the lens of India's interests. In Trump's second term, question arises, will NATO survive in its current form? Will Europe go its own way? And more importantly, how should India respond to this shifting balance of power? From the halls of Brussels to the Indo-Pacific strategic rooms in New Delhi, we will explore how this new era could bring both challenges and hidden opportunities for India. Stay with us as we unpack this evolving global chessboard and ask the one question that really matters. Is India ready for post-Trump world? Today, we are honored to have with us a distinguished voice in the field of geopolitics and strategic affairs, Dr. Adityanjee. Sorry. A well-known policy expert, a strategic thinker, and the president of the Council for Strategic Affairs. Dr. Adityanjee brings to the table decades of experience in analyzing global trends, India's foreign policy, and the balance of power in a rapidly shifting world order. He has been a vocal advocate for India's national interest, unapologetically pragmatic in his views, and deeply rooted in civilizational consciousness. A combination that's rare and much needed in today's narrative-driven discourse. Whether it's the rise of China, the future of US-India ties, or the redefinition of NATO and global alliance, Dr. Adityanjee insights are precise, thought-provoking, and always value-packed. Dr. Adityanjee, it's truly a pleasure to have you here on Global Focus. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for inviting me yet once again on your platform, Global Focus. Delighted to be on this platform to discuss challenging issues.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So nice of you. So my first question to you, in Trump 2.0, will NATO become weaker or just more Americanized? What do you say about it?
I think it's a very interesting question. NATO was always Americanized. It was never de-Americanized. If we see the birth of NATO in post-Second World War era, NATO came formally by a treaty in December of 1949. But prior to that, a predecessor was Treaty of Dunkirk that was signed in 1947. When NATO was formed, its first Secretary General, that was Lord Ismay, he had famously said that the purpose of NATO is to keep Soviet Union out, Americans in, and Germany down in the Europe. That was the stated purpose. It had 12 members at that point in time. Across Atlantic, there were 2 members that were not part of Europe, and those were United States and Canada. And leadership was always by the United States, the victor of the World War II. It was part of World War II, post-World War II security architecture. Over a period of time, NATO has grown from 12 initial members to now 32 members. So it's become very bulky. It has been very aggressive. The current tensions that NATO is facing are its own creations. When an organization becomes very bulky and when there's a mission creep,
Yeah.
if you don't adhere to the original mission, you
Mm.
will see challenges like NATO is facing now,
Mm.
that it has become a hodgepodge, heterogeneous body of European nations that have their own national interests.
Yeah.
And at least in Trump era, they are contrasting and conflicting with Trump or United States interests. For your viewers, I may also add that I mentioned the word mission creep because NATO was supposed to be maintaining security and defense of Europe. It did not have in its charter any rationale to extend beyond Europe. But in last 20, 25 years, we have seen that NATO has had a mission creep. NATO intervened in Iraq when United Nations Security Council refused to endorse US request for military action in Iraq.
Yeah.
NATO also intervened in Libya. Libya is not part of Europe. NATO had this ISAF in Afghanistan, NATO allies. So there's a mission creep of NATO. And why that happened? Again, for your viewers, a little bit of history. In post World War II era, United States created three main security, organizations for global strategic architecture. NATO was one of them, but there were two more, and those two were SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, and CENTO, okay, Central Treaty Organization that was focusing on West Asia and Northern Africa region. SEATO and CENTO folded up. CENTO was also called the Baghdad Pact, and SEATO was also called the Manila Pact. Because of the tensions within, like we are witnessing now in NATO, there were tensions within these SEATO as well as CENTO, and they folded up. So, in absence of those security organizations, NATO is slowly creeping its, sphere of influence and sphere of action all over the world. And yes, it's not possible for any kind of military bloc to become so heterogeneous that, you know, Turkey's security interests are very different from Poland's security interests. Britain's security interests are very different from France's security interests.
Mm.
So, too extensive enlargement of NATO has not come to its help. And we know that in first term, Trump had said, before coming to the first term, he had said that he will, leave NATO because the Europeans were not paying for their own defense. At that time, the target for defense spending was 2% of GDP for each nation. Uh, Trump in the first term was pressurizing these NATO countries to increase the defense expenditures, and initially there was lukewarm reception and quasi-resistance. They were apprehensive that US will leave actually, but US was persuaded to continue to support NATO with the explicit assumption that countries will shape up. So in 2021, there were 6 countries in NATO that had more than 2% of their GDP for defense expenditure. At this point in time, out of 32 countries, because NATO has enlarged from 29 to 32 very recently in last couple of years, out of those 32 countries, 23 have their national defense budgets more than 2%. And in fact, in some countries like Poland, it is almost 5%. But in second term, Trump has raised the ante again. Now he wants European countries to spend 5% of their defense budget of the national GDP. So again, there's shifting of goalposts in typical Trumpian style. And NATO countries from the Europe side are thinking, can we trust, can we rely on US for our security? The central theme of NATO is the Article 5, which says attack on one NATO country is an attack on entire NATO. And this Article 5 was invoked only once in NATO's existence, and that was after 9/11, terror attacks on United States. Now we have a situation that a US led by Trump is very, very dismissive of Europe and dismissive of NATO. J.D. Vance, the vice president, when he went to Munich summit, gave very negative messages to NATO members about US involvement and all that sort of thing. US is also restructuring its own defense department, which, if some of the plans are to be seen, will require a US giving the Supreme Allied Commander status. Since the inception of NATO, the tradition was that the Secretary General of NATO was from one of the European countries, and the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe was an American four-star general. And the current American four-star general is likely to finish his 3-year tenure in summer. And it is likely that US may say that US no longer wants to, take the leadership of the Supreme Allied Command. So European countries may have to find their own. That is one issue. Second is that US military is going to restructure for cost saving. Already their budget is $850 billion. The plan is to consolidate US Northern Command and Southern Command into one in the United States mainland. But also the Command and Africa Command and Central Command to be consolidated into one. And these kind of reforms will bring about saving of almost $280 million to the US. So US is undergoing its own restructuring, and that does not take into consideration NATO. We also have a situation that US is making territorial demands on 2 of the NATO members. So where is the Article 5? If US attacks, let's say, Greenland, will Denmark ask for Article 5 to be invoked? Mr. Trump has already said that by whatever means we'll take over, even if it is military takeover. Yes, you have a US base in Greenland, but if US were to take over Greenland by force, will Denmark invoke Article 5? Will other European NATO countries come to Denmark's assistance? Will they send their forces to protect Greenland from US forces? So there are very important questions. Similarly, Canada is a NATO country. Trump is saying that he will acquire Canada.
Denmark is also a member of NATO?
Yes, Denmark is a member of NATO. Canada is a member of NATO.
Yeah.
And Trump is threatening that they will take Canada over as 51st state. So does this inspire confidence in European countries about US's ability to protect their interests? Yes, US is going to protect its own interests, but will European countries feel relieved that US is providing them security umbrella? So there are a lot of rhetorical questions. One thing is for certain, the NATO as we saw from 1949 to 2024 is not going to be the same. Whether it will stay, whether it will have a total fracture from United States, whether it will be in some other form, that is yet to be decided. It will depend upon global geopolitical situation. And for your viewers, I may also add that in the past, NATO was a US-led security organization. Any attempt by European countries to take some independent security initiative and create a European defense force, mainly by Germany and France. There were some attempts earlier, 2 decades ago, was frowned upon by United States because they didn't want Europeans to have an independent defense initiative. Now, all the NATO countries are under US nuclear umbrella. They get extended deterrence. There are two European countries that have nuclear programs. One is UK, second is France. UK is very well allied to United States. Essentially, it is extension of US nuclear weapons program. They don't have independent, you know, arsenal and things like that. France has said that if push comes to shove, they will offer extended nuclear deterrence umbrella to NATO countries or European countries, whatever happens. So France is willing to take the leadership. The point I'm making it, the geopolitical situation in 2025 is vastly different from what happened in 1949.
Yeah.
And after dissolution of Soviet Union and after disbanding of Warsaw Pact, NATO had lost its relevance. It was artificially sustained. It was aggressively, the membership was enlarged. And you are seeing the consequences that now under Trump administration, United States does not want NATO to have any role in Ukraine war. But European countries are gung-ho about that. They want to fight Russia in Ukraine, but they cannot do without United States support. We are seeing different dynamics. US is courting Russia. US has not put any tariffs on Russian Federation, on Russia, on Cuba, and Korea, North Korea. United States has not put the 10% tariff that has gone on every other country. So you have enough indications that Europeans are worried whether US will be a good ally. Can they rely on US? So with US plans for cost savings and restructuring their own defense services and possibly not taking the role of allied supreme commander of Europe, possibly consolidating US defense forces, European command, central command, and the Africa command into single command, there will be impacts on European security architecture. So next 3.5 years will be very interesting to watch. We cannot predict which way things will go, but this NATO is not going to be the same as it was earlier.
So, how would a weakened NATO affect India's strategic calculations, especially with Russia being a major defense partner?
Well, India does not rely on NATO for India's defense. So India has some, polite relationship with NATO in Partnership for Peace program, but India has defended herself without reliance on any outside country. Uh, if NATO is weakened, it has some implications for the European security architecture. NATO did not come to India's help when we had 1962 war. NATO did not come to India's help when we had 65 war with Pakistan. In fact, some of the NATO countries were arming Pakistan and abetting Pakistan. Similarly, in 1971, NATO had a very shameful history, and as recently in 2017, when India had Doklam conflict with China on India-Bhutan, China tri-junction, and later in 2020, in Galwan Valley clashes, where was NATO? They didn't make any statement in support of India. So NATO is irrelevant as far as India is concerned. India has an independent defense posture. In that defense posture, India will cooperate with a number of countries depending upon the need of the country while making India self-reliant under Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Yeah.
Uh, Unfortunately, uh, any relationship with NATO requires India acquiescing to NATO's interests, disregarding India's own national interests. NATO is more focused on Taiwan and Taiwan Strait and South
Mhm.
China Sea. Why should India allow itself to be drawn in a conflict in South China Sea or on Taiwan Strait when
Mhm.
NATO is not going to come to India's help when we have land conflict with China?
Right. So can India benefit from NATO's possible internal divisions under Trump 2.0?
Well, every country will have to make its own determination. If NATO is weakened, it does not either harm or benefit India, but India like any nation, any crisis has to be taken as opportunity. You have to find an opportunity. You have to see the post, weakened NATO or post NATO geopolitical scenario. In that scenario, you can have bilateral relationship, defense relationship. You can sell your armament to some of the NATO countries. I mean, I don't see any reason why India should not actually sell, let's say, BrahMos missiles to either Poland or to uh, other sort of NATO countries that have cash at hand to buy India's armament. Maybe India might try to sell uh, Tejas Mark 1 and Mark 2S fighter aircraft to some of the NATO countries if they are interested. Why not? It's a free for all defense trade. Every country that has some armament wants to sell it. So if US support for NATO countries goes down, and some of those countries are not entitled to purchase, or US equipment too expensive for them without US fiscal support. India can use that market opportunity to market its own hardware. Why not? Or for that matter, any other theater, whether it is Taiwan, whether it is Philippines, whether it is Thailand, whether it's Vietnam.
So could this scenario accelerate India's emergence as a balancing power between East and West?
Uh, Answer is yes. I think what world is witnessing is from a unipolar world dominated by a hyperpower to an emerging multipolar world with multiple stakeholders. And these multiple poles are going to be United States because it is clear that there is rupture in the relationship, transatlantic relationship, and US interests are different from European interests. So the major powers would be United States, Russia, China, India, and European Union. Or if you don't want to use the word European Union, you may say a successor of NATO in Europe. So we are witnessing emergence of multipolarity, and in all major issues, whether they are economic issues, whether they are defense issues, whether that is environment, India is coming as a true balancer in ultimate decision making process. India is not gung ho militarily. They don't send their forces, armed forces, unlike NATO or US or Russia. But India is an important part of United Nations peacekeeping program and is, I think, fifth largest in terms of contributing soldiers. India's precondition is that India will send its armed forces only under the UN Green Beret,
Mhm.
you know, command and not under NATO or any other military alliance.
So how will Trump's transactional diplomacy impact India-NATO relation, if at all?
Well, there will be indirect influence. The way Trump is indulging in transactional economic changes or economic revolution or global trade war, same thing will happen with the relationship with NATO. And as we said, that NATO will not be the same. And that will be an opportunity for India to engage, whether, we have very good bilateral defense relationship with France. France is a pillar in Europe. We probably are going to have a bilateral free trade area with UK fairly soon. So that will enhance not only the economic relationship, but also possibly defense relationship. And in the past, it was the one way round, the weapons and the uh, armament used to come from UK to India. Now that situation has changed because UK does not have its own indigenous or independent industry anymore. It has become very much weakened. So similarly, with other NATO members in Europe, apart from Turkey, apart from Turkey, India can consider having bilateral defense relationships in terms of, weapons transfers, armament transfers, all those kind of things. So yes, it would be a good opportunity for India if
Hmm.
NATO gets weakened because of Trump's transactional style and Europeans feel that they can no longer rely on US technology. I think there will be opportunity to collaborate more with European advanced defense manufacturers in terms of transfer of technology because US hardly does any transfer of technology.
Yeah.
We in India rely on Russian Federation, France, Israel, and US for our defense acquisition. These are the four major countries. Having said that, with US there are problems in terms of delivery schedule and costs of the equipment and technology transfer. France and Israel have been the most reliable partners. But there's no reason why India cannot actually, you know, have working relationship with countries like Sweden that have a strong armament industry and, have quicker technology transfer arrangements or contracts. So it is anybody's guess, every country is always ever vigilant. You look for your own national interest. And
Yeah.
as I said, every crisis, any part of the world is an opportunity for you.
Yes.
And there's no reason why you should be diffident as long as you are not warmongering. And India is not a warmongering country. So I'm pretty sure the government of India will take a very, you know, well considered, well thought out action in any emerging geopolitical scenario that comes to India's interests.
So should India wait and watch how Trump 2.0 shapes the alliance, or should India deepen its engagement with NATO now?
India has hardly any major engagement with NATO. I said India is not a member of NATO. India does not believe in military blocs. We just have some joint exercises with NATO under Partnership for Peace program. So whatever happens between US led by Trump and NATO is their own issue. India should not get involved in that kind of thing because I mean India has no skin in the game in NATO. India wisely refused to get maintained a very balanced,
Hmm.
very rational, equipoised stance about the war in Ukraine, despite having good relationship with Russian Federation. The
Hmm.
Prime Minister said it's not the era of war. So India has shown maturity. You don't want to get sucked into other people's conflicts. And as far as you see Europe has very tribal mentality. They have ongoing tribal white Caucasian wars going on for all the time. Yes, after World War II, there was some calming and relative peace, but not anymore. Not anymore.
So what would Trump 2.0 mean for global security alliances like Quad, and how does that tie in with NATO?
Trump resurrected Quad after it went into sort of dormant situation
Yes. Yes.
in 2016 to 2020 in first term of Trump.
mm,
Quad was resurrected and was given more important, and then Biden took over from that. Trump is definitely concerned about security in the Indo-Pacific more than the security in the Europe. So bottom line is that NATO hardly, has any independent assets aside from US assets in Indo-Pacific region. France has some its own security interests and all, but one of the theses or one of the doctrine Trump is adopting is to de-emphasize security of Europe and leave it to Europeans, let them stew in their own mess. He
mm.
wants Europeans who have taken a free ride over the shoulders and back of the United States for security to spend on their security. And he's saying that he's not going to guarantee security of any of the NATO countries under Article 5. And that is likely to happen. Trump is more concerned about aggressive China in the Indo Pacific. So we will see some strengthening of Quad cooperation. Of course, Quad is not a military alliance, it's just a security dialogue.
Mm.
There is some level of cooperation, but we will see more, let's say, harmonization between Indian Indo Pacific strategic posture versus US Indo Pacific strategic posture. What form will it take? I cannot predict because it depends upon the situation. There are too many factors, and it is a fool's job to make predictions that are not going to hold true. But I think there will be a positive sort of bilateral and multilateral relationship in Indo-Pacific, which is more of interest at this point in time. Whether NATO will have any roles, I doubt it very much. European countries are more interested in saving themselves. And after the global trade tariffs, Europe is more likely to become closer to China for trade and commerce. So you will see a very different world. And in that case, again, India comes as a balancer. So India will have
So,
good relations and good role
mm,
in the Indo-Pacific, possibly as a one of the major security providers in the Indo-Pacific region. I won't say net security provider because that gives too much of role to India, and India does not have that wherewithal or economic might to enforce security as the net security provider, but one of the major security providers in
I have
Indo-Pacific.
only 5 minutes of time left, and one last question. Can
Go
India
ahead.
play a leading role in reshaping regional security frameworks if traditional Western alliances like NATO become unstable?
Well, India is an important part in any regional security framework as long as it does not indulge in warmongering. India has never, said that we will send our armed forces here or there to threaten this country or threaten that country. The only exception was Indo Sri Lanka peacekeeping force, which was an aberration because of a untested, immature prime minister that caused immense harm to Indian armed forces. So India is not going to send its armed forces under any military bloc, only under United Nations Green Beret leadership. But India will provide. There are aspects of security that are important, and India has been providing, sort of fighting the piracy in the Arabian Sea and Gulf region, in the Indian Ocean. Uh, in the tsunami of 2005, India played a major role for rehabilitation and reconstruction. So India will continue to do those kind of things without getting into hot war with any country in the Indo-Pacific region.
So, thank you so much, Dr. Adityanjee, for sharing your valuable insights with us. Your perspective has truly helped us understand the bigger picture, what it means for India on the global stage. To our viewers, thank you for joining us on Global Focus. Stay tuned for more conversations that decode the world through an Indian lens. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and if you have any question on your mind, do share with us. We'll be answering those questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Adityanjee, for a valuable time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sinha. My parting message is that India has arrived on the scene. India cannot be ignored in any issue, globally or regionally. India is a major balancing power, whether it is economic issue, environmental issue, or security issue. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.